Welcome to Gay Milwaukee, everybody. And today on the show, we have a very special guest, Katherine. How are you today?
Good.
Yeah. I'm so happy you're on the show, actually. We just got done having a great talk, and you're going to talk to us about the ups and downs and all-arounds of just trans and your story, right?
Yes, I will.
Tell us about it. When did it all happen? And let's get to it.
Well, I had officially kind of transitioned almost 4 years ago now, coming out, and it's just been a wild ride since then. Before that, though, I lived sort of this double life for about 10 years, where I would, because I traveled a lot, I had the good fortune of sort of like meeting a lot of other transgender people and getting into the community, and it would help me sort of make my decisions to transition. And you reach a point where you jump or you jump, and you jump and you transition, or you jump and it's not a good consequence.
I feel all of us in the queer community feel that way at some level, don't we?
Right. So, and I have to say, and I tell everybody this, that being true to yourself is the best thing you can do. I mean, even if you're not in the LGBT community, but just not hiding whatever you're hiding to people, because it makes you sad, it makes you depressed. I mean, I lived a really long time with this secret, and I was an angry person. I was not happy. I was not happy with myself. I was not confident. After transitioning, I'm really happy. I'm much more confident, and forceful.
Yeah. I really like what you said about that. That's not always an easy thing to do, to really, listen to who you are inside, especially in today's world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's something I've heard also from a lot of other girls that I know and transgender people that have transitioned, that actually taking that leap wasn't everything that they had, their fears didn't necessarily come true. Now, there's a lot of pain in our community, and we're certainly under attack. And unfortunately, we have a lot of transgender women that have been killed and maimed, and that, which is a horrible thing.
I feel like it's the first time, generally in American history, we're really actually paying attention to that now.
Yes, which is, that's a horrible thing, but yet it is giving us visibility. And I think people are recognizing that we're here. We're part of the community and society that's making this go. And we have a place and we have a voice, and we shouldn't be closeted. We should be proud of that.
Yes. Speaking of being proud, we have to talk about this. Tell us about the obstacles, because coming out as trans, that has to be one of the hardest coming outs in the entire queer community, in my opinion. Just due to the nature of there's a lot more to it than hypothetically like gay or lesbian. I feel like it's not just a sexuality. Well, it is not necessarily sexuality, is it? There we go. Another thing, a lot of people do misconstrue being trans as a sexuality, but it's not.
Right. No. It was really it's who you are, or who your mind tells you you are. You're just unfortunately born in the wrong body. Mm-hmm. The hurdles to coming out, coming up to that point. I was tending to be more androgynous, a lot of scarves, little makeup. I mean, for the last year, even, fingernails. So I was just like this really flamboyant person. Some people, as I came out, they were like, well, okay, that makes sense now. So it wasn't that bad. Others, some family members, just couldn't get their head around it, couldn't understand it, and just didn't want anything to do with us. And we've just moved on. Others, family members, I've gotten closer to. My brother and sister, I think we're closer than we ever were.
Yes.
And part of that, again, is because I'm really who I am and not hiding anything or afraid I'm going to be discovered or angry.
What would be some advice? Because from my experiences, a lot of the concerns about people that are closeted, whether it's trans or any sexuality in the LGBTQ community, when their number one concern usually I get is family. Right. What advice do you have for that, for someone that wants to transition but worries about that?
I was fortunate that, I even though historically it was a very conservative family, and from a small town, they were very accepting. And when it really comes down to it, it's about the person, and that they really loved you and wanted you to succeed and be happy, and that overcame everything else. So I think you just have to kind of put your faith in that. And again, there's kind of talked about earlier. I mean, I have a group of really close friends in Detroit that helped me through this transition of transgender girls. And we like to say, you're born into a family, and then you can choose your family. And we've chosen each other as our family.
Yeah, that is such a prevalent theme in the LGBT community, isn't it?
Right, yes, it's true. It's very true. And so if your own family, kind of rejects you, unfortunately, or pushes you away, or your friends, there are people out there that will support you.
Yes.
There are people out there that will help you through this, that want you to be happy. And hopefully you can find them. And certainly, I found through the internet that it's a lot easier today than it was 30 years ago.
I know this may sound corny, but there's always at least one person out there that's happy you exist.
That's
always.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So we talked about family. Let's talk about how it is in the workplace.
Well, so I'm an architect. I primarily focus my career on art centers and working in theaters. So my clientele is probably a little more liberal orientated and understanding and members of the community. So it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Most of my clients stuck with me. I had a few that were afraid, they said, oh yeah, we'll stick with you. But the reality was their fears overcame them. Their fears that their donor base would not support them or accept me. Their own prejudice came out. So we just parted ways. But for the most part, because I had an established career and was known in the workplace and in the community of what I do, that there were bumps, but it wasn't as bad as it could be.
Because your work stood for itself.
Wow. Yes, because the work stood up and that.
I think too, I've noticed from what I see online that sometimes with applications, they're really judgmental, whether it's the way your name looks or, gender or color. And I imagine being trans plays a big part into that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much of it, again, in architecture is the personal relationship or the trust you develop with a client. They're giving you a lot of money to develop their dreams. And, and everybody has second thoughts and fears, and this just might be one more layer that they just can't quite get their head around yet. So, I'm hopeful. We'll get through it.
So one thing I really was, I don't want to say excited, but one thing you brought up when we were off camera was you talked about how you understood what white male privilege was, but when you trans, it was a whole new level of just realization for you. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in went to school, thought I was a fairly liberal-minded, open-minded person. Finding this community, and and you would hear all this stuff about white male privilege, and you go, yeah, but but I don't have, I understand that, and I'm really trying to help everybody and be open. And after transitioning and being in the position of presenting as a woman, and then experiencing that sort of being ignored or second guessed or talked over in meetings, and that it's like, wow, this really does exist. And I knew a lot of professional women. I mean, my ex was a professional woman, my mother was a professional woman, and they would talk about this, and I would try to and if I was in a room with other women before transition, I'd always try to make sure I would include. Didn't do half as much as we should be doing. So I'm trying to tell other sort of males that, guys, wake up! Really, you really do need to work at this and push it. And then, being white and male, I never had second thoughts about going anywhere.
What would be the biggest advice you'd give for someone who's been on both sides of the fence? Like, is it listen?
Yeah, I mean, really, really listen, and really, when you have that urge to top the story or to tell, keep it in. Just listen and ask, other people around the table to participate, and really have it as a group effort. Mm-hmm. I think that's critical.
Do you think that has a lot to do with the way America treats masculinity and versus femininity? Like with masculinity, there's so much of a push to be assertive, usually be the more outspoken one, usually push harder. Like we were talking earlier, America's view of masculinity is don't be a punk, don't be a pussy, grow up, be a man. Just there's much more of a reinforcement on those type of attributes.
There is. I mean, it's very much about, sports and what kind of team were you on, or what kind of, sports did you play, or, are you stronger, faster, or anything like that. None of those things I was.
High
five. I never really felt comfortable with that, or, participated in that. But, at the same time, then I felt left out.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a place for a guy that, wanted to, do more art or draw or read or go to museums or go to fashion shows. I loved fashion shows. So, so again, it's like, we need to tell people to accept their sons if that's who they are. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
We have a lot to learn too, even from children. I feel if you give a child the permission to actually speak their truth without putting all these labels and placements on them, they'll tell you a lot.
Yeah.
There's even just little things like, hey, I like dolls.
Right.
And it can be such a thing with adults sometimes.
Right. The whole, yes, the proper toys, girls can't play with erector sets, girls can't, do this, that needs to change. And I think it is changing, it's good, but it needs to get out of the sort of liberal bubbles
and the stigmas
and work its way into, the masses.
Yes. So there's another thing I really want to talk to you about, because I know we touched base on this before, but Caitlyn Jenner said something I kind of wanted to talk about on this show for a while. She said something along the lines of how more, at least for male to female transgendered individuals, the more you look like a female, the more accepted you are, and if you're not really. I'm loosely quoting, so feel free to post the actual quote below. But it almost seemed like as if she was putting down people that did look the part. How does that come up?
Well, I'm going to get in trouble. but yes. I mean, there is a I think a hierarchy or an acceptance level. As it's the same in the transgender community as it is in society. The individual that fits the norm, the beauty norm. The tall, thin. Acceptable proportions is generally more accepted than the person that doesn't, or somebody that maybe hasn't transitioned fully, or maybe doesn't want to. Maybe he's more of a kind of in the middle, more queer questioning and going back and forth. And there, I think I don't know if it's the beauty norm or if it's just that is so much a gray area that. It just confuses people, and people don't like to be confused. They like yes, no, 0, 1.
Is that confusion gray area hierarchy in the trans community itself, or is it from the outside communities?
It's a little bit of both.
It's both. Do you feel it comes from the pressures of the outside?
I think so. I think it's baggage we all carry still.
I think instead of necessarily jumping, because I know people can take that the wrong way, but I think the same thing happens from my experience sometimes in the gay community, whereas the more straight acting gays are deemed more attractive in some cases, and I think that does kind of, and this is my perception, it comes out very unfair, whether it's trans or gay or whatever, that because I feel we really need to look out for our own people.
I mean, some people that can in the community, like a Caitlyn Jenner, right? I mean, they can afford all the surgeries and do all the stuff. I mean, it's like kind of envious,
It must be very expensive.
It is very expensive. And others that can't, you just kind of, try to muddle along. But again, the same in any world. If you've got an inner happiness and confidence, how you look, people overcome that.
Yeah.
They see, I want to be by that person because they're confident.
Yeah.
They're happy. They're they have a certain power and magnetism.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what that frame is or that what they're presenting as or who they're presenting as. It overcomes that. So even if, you don't feel like you're fitting this norm, that just try to exude the confidence or show how happy you really are being yourself. And I think that gets people along.
That's interesting because it's just, forgive me if I come off a little bit like I can't find the right words because this is still new territory for me to even talk about, that there's even a norm within the trans community, because you think that community would know better than anybody to be accepting of all levels. And not that I'm saying they're not.
Right.
It's just, if anyone would understand that the most.
And there is a lot of discussion within the trans community about, how can we, eat our own, or, I think we should all be supportive. But again, there's that cross-dresser to full transition, spectrum.
Yes.
And that hierarchy, does exist. And there's the same spectrum for, you would think that everybody in that community is very liberal and open-minded, and there's just as many conservatives.
It seems like a very multi-dimensional thing, and I feel, the rest of the world has sometimes this tendency to just clump it all together.
Right.
And there's just so much I feel we're not talking about with this.
Right. And I think, so, I mean, the more that as individuals we can be out there and talking about it, or at least just presenting well
and living by example.
I think the easier it'll make it for the next generation and the younger people that are trying to find themselves.
Yes, and it's funny. In the more recent years, I've learned the term non-binary as well to kind of fit in the realm of it. I mean, on the outside, whoever's not in the LGBT community, it might be very confusing with the drag queens and then the trans and the non-binary and all the above. I mean, just the other day I saw. I want to say, I don't know if it was. It may have been a non-binary Barbie. It was a Barbie that could kind of go between genders.
Oh, I saw.
You saw that?
I saw those.
I thought that was really nice. That's progress.
And of course, no. So again, there is progress. I mean, it seems like for every abuse or slur or hateful comment we get from our politicians, there's the general society, I think, is moving forward and accepting. So I feel good about it. My son asked, do you wish you would have transitioned earlier? And I'm like, well, maybe at a younger age, but I don't know if I could have had the strength to do it at a different time.
This day and age, too, I feel it's a very different time. Like, even in the last few years, it's a very different time.
Right.
A lot's happened in just, 2 years ago.
Right. Well, when I did come out to the family and everything, and then my daughter called me about 2 days later, and she goes, now we can have a girls' night out.
That actually sounds really nice.
It was nice.
So I have to say, a lot of the relationships around you, they change a little bit for the better sometimes then, hey?
They did. I mean, there were people that I thought were very close friends and long-term friends that just stopped calling. That all said, oh yeah, we're behind you, we support you, we want you to be happy, but just drifted away. There's new friends, a lot more in the community itself that I think are closest friends I've ever had. So, it changes. It's different. But I think overall, I know overall, it's the best thing I ever did.
I'm going to ask one more question. Out of all of this journey, what moment stood out to you the most?
Going back to the family moment, you could say maybe it wasn't the happiest of circumstances. It was a weird circumstance, but my stepdad passed away a couple of years ago, and after I had transitioned and everything, lived a great life. He was 98, died the way we should, all want, with the family around him, and said goodbye to everybody and just went to sleep. No pain. But anyways, out of that, my mother finally got around to, getting the tombstone.
Yeah.
And, it was their names, parents of, and the 3 children, and she used my new name. So.
That must have really meant a lot.
Yeah, it meant a lot.
We're wrapping this up before I start crying. You see it, don't you? Getting misty. Thank you so much for being on the show. You got me at the end. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing. And if you have a story to tell, send us a message. We're signing out.
Bye.